Time for our special call planning commission meeting. We have one application on our agenda today, and that's for a sidewalk cafe. If, I don't know if we have anyone from the public that's going to wish to speak to this, but if we do, you can come forward, state your name and address, and make your comments, and try to keep them to 3 minutes or less, please. All right, you'll go ahead, Mr. Terry.
The application today is for a sidewalk cafe license for the Little Cigar Shop LLC. Applicant is Jason Pitts, the owner, located at 110 2nd Avenue Northeast. And the request is to recommend to the City Council approval of a revocable license for a sidewalk cafe for the Little Cigar Shop. This has been reviewed by all internal departments and is recommended for approval.
Okay, is there anyone from the public that would wish to speak to this request? If not, do we have a motion to recommend? Okay. After we get the motion,
Okay.
question. Motion for approval. All right, I have a motion. Do I have a second? Second. Motion by Mr. Pike, second by Mr. Temple. All right, any questions or comments now, Myrna?
Okay, thank you. Do they sell food?
They have a, they are licensed for on-premise wine, and they have, on the weekends, a mimosa service that they're looking to expand that does have food offerings at that service.
Okay. I looked at all the approvals and I don't have any issues with it, but I thought a cafe license was just for food.
It allows for refreshments, food, those things. It is covered under the ordinance.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions or comments?
Let me ask you this. Under the cafe license, are we talking about just light food, or do we get into things
Right.
with with the
They
health
don't-
department, all that stuff?
They don't have a full kitchen, and so it's nothing like that. It's just light snacks that are provided with their wine offerings. Right now, they are very limited in what they do, but their hope is that this is the first step, getting this sidewalk cafe to expand their offerings. So they could potentially do more later, but right now it's a limited, very light snack menu that they offer.
So if they go into it later, do they have to come back, or do this all?
It will be covered as long as it doesn't go outside the scope of
Okay.
what is allowed in the sidewalk cafe.
Okay.
Then they will just be allowed to expand those offerings.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I'm just curious. Does a sidewalk cafe mean tables and chairs?
Tables
Does
and
that make it-
chairs, yes.
Okay,
It just-
because
so-
I passed by there and I just saw chairs.
Yes,
and I was-
the best way to think about a sidewalk cafe and how this works is it just allows the city to let a business owner expand their premises outside onto the public right of way. So we've got extra wide sidewalks in the downtown district, and the best way to think about it is they're just allowed to move their front wall out. And it's, their premises can expand out front a little ways to allow for outdoor seating.
They still have to allow, 60 inches of sidewalk?
They do, and all that's checked by the building department, engineering, police, and fire departments when they're reviewing these applications, that all that open space is still allowed and the sidewalk's not impeded.
Okay. Please call the roll.
Lawrence,
Yes.
Borden, Tate,
Yes.
Wynn, Temple,
Yes.
Burrows,
Yes.
Pike,
Yes.
and Way.
Yes.
Okay, that will be recommended with a 6-0 vote. Okay, and that ends that portion of our planning commission meeting. And now we'll have a special meeting to discuss the zoning rewrite. The intent of this meeting is for the planning commission to discuss and be informed about the changes from the last public comment session. Of course, it's open to the public. There'll be no questions from the public. Anyone from the public that's here that has questions, please let one of us know afterwards, and
And please
We'll
submit
answer.
them in writing to the planning department too,
Yeah,
as well.
exactly.
Any comments received after this point will be given to the planning commission and the city council.
and everybody received a copy of those comments, all the comments from the public and also the comments from the planning department back. So we're ready to start.
All right, the first thing I wanted to do today was just take you through, the edits that are recommended at this point based off of the, comments received from the public in this last round of public comments, as well as, recommendations from the staff. And, legal department took one more deep dive into it, and, several of the comments came from legal department's final review. Most of what you will see in what was given to you as far as edits are typos. A lot of it was just, a comma's missing here, some capitalization, this word needs changed. So a lot of it was that, and I won't go through each and every one of those. But I do want to touch on just some of the larger changes, just to make you aware and allow you opportunity to ask any questions you may have from your going through those. The first thing, the very first edit, and I put it up front just because it's could be considered one of the larger changes, is the current references to an institutional MC district. We are looking to just get rid of that district altogether. Through all of the other rounds of changes to this point, it was determined that it was redundant to the regular institutional zoning district and really didn't make sense to even include it anymore. So the recommendation is going to be just to remove that district, and all mentions of it just need to reference just the general institutional district, and any uses that aren't currently allowed in the institutional district that are in that MC district just need to be made allowable. Which, like I said, at this point, there are only 2 or 3, and that's what really led us to making this recommendation, it's really just redundant at this point.
Are there any deal issues, differences in them?
They're not, they really, like I said, through all of the changes that had been made through all the rounds, we just kind of realized that they are roughly the same and they serve the same intent. So why have 2 districts when one can do? Because that's kind of the purpose of a lot of the changes from the old ordinance to the new ordinance, is just simplification, making it easier for 1, administration, and 2, for the public to use the document. All right, moving down through here, the next change to make you aware of is in the district transitions. M1A, which is our current expressway commercial district, which is the special zoning for the Beltline. Originally and up to this point, we were showing that transitioning to the CC district, the community commercial. After looking at the districts and really analyzing the things that are allowed, the intensity of the development, those kinds of things, it's the staff's recommendation that transition to a CR, which is our regional commercial district. It functions that way now, and giving it the CC district transition would really limit too much based on what is currently allowed there. The intent of the new zoning district, the new zoning ordinance, is not to be drastically different from the old ordinance. It's more about modernizing how we do things and getting us a more modern ordinance to then make those major changes to later in individual conversations that need to happen.
So the CR could be more dense than the CC?
Slightly, and it allows a few more uses that the CC does not. And most of that, like I said, is just to try to keep it in line as much as possible with what's currently allowed in that district.
Since you're gonna be skipping some bullet points, can you sort of tell us
Sure.
which
Tell
one we
us
go
which
to?
Yeah,
when you
so
start?
that one was page 1-6.
Okay.
Yeah.
As you're
Thank
moving down through there. Or, yeah, 1-6, that's
That's
the
right.
transitions table. And like I said, that one is in an effort to, we want, after it's adopted, we want as little disruption or, most people won't even see a difference from the old to the new when they go into place. Like I said, it's more about just getting us a more modern code to then have those individual conversations and make those larger changes too.
Let me ask, you, everybody's got a copy of this, everybody that's in the audience.
I don't know, this was only provided to you all at this point for your
Do we have an
review.
extra copy?
I have a couple, he's going to make some now.
Okay.
We can provide those.
Is anybody out there that would like a copy? Forrest, you want a copy? Bang?
And we can get Bane a copy as well.
Okay.
Okay.
I think it'd be easier for them to follow
Oh,
along
that's
if they
fine.
had a copy.
Yes, that's fine.
Is it, what we're looking at online, the one thing that's online, or is it we look at something?
No, these are the changes.
Yeah, the
These are
document
recommended
that is
changes.
online, these are recommended edits to that document at this point to get us to a final draft document ready for presentation and adoption.
So Tommy went to make a couple of copies?
Yes, sir, he
Okay.
did.
Okay.
All right. The next one, any questions, more questions or comments about that one? Like I said, it was more about just analyzing, what's currently allowed in the M1A district and getting a suitable district, in the new one that matches it closer than what the CC did. All right, let's see. One of the comments, I will say this one seems kind of minor, it's the next one, page 2-2. There is a table that was causing a little confusion, and to try to clear that up, there's some text that says review procedure. We're recommending just take that out and leave it blank. That table, there was some confusion as to was it a timeline, and it's not. That's not a timeline at all, and the wording review procedure was what was causing that confusion. So we were just recommending a simple edit of taking that out. The next one you'll see is a very common thing, changing the text Historic Preservation Committee to Historic Preservation Commission, just correcting the title of a few things in here that got missed in the first few rounds.
Hey Lee, sorry.
Yes.
Does that match with the architectural review
I
board?
was just gonna.
It does, yes, so,
Make sure we've got that noted.
yes, it should. Caroline has been involved in this process, and she's who helped me on that one,
Cause
so.
I was gonna just suggest that, cause when we first got this, there was no ARB.
I'll check it one more time just to make sure, but the last time I checked, it was correct, so I'll
When I went through
verify.
this part, that wasn't in existence
Yes,
yet.
yes. Let's see. Next one, let's see. Okay,
Can-
the next major one to make you aware of is gonna be towards the end of the first page, page 2-27. So this is concerning, site plan and the approval procedure for site plans. One of the things that is changing from the old ordinance to the new ordinance is that site plans are going to be an administrative approval going forward, except for what are deemed to be major site plans. And what allows us to kick that up to Planning Commission is if at any point during the review procedure of a site plan, if 2 or more members of the technical review committee think that it is falling into a major site plan category, they can raise objection and kick it up to Planning Commission for full Planning Commission review and approval of site plans. 2.
And since we always have 2 members on that committee, so actually we get the control of that if we want.
It's just an extra check just to make sure that Planning Commission is staying, informed of the, anything that's going to be large and could potentially have impacts on, a large area.
Lee, can you go back up to 210?
Sure.
And talk about that, the 500 feet?
Yes, the 500 feet is our convention for notifying parties of anything going on with, as far as business with the Planning Commission. It's what our current convention is, and it's what we'd like to stick with going forward, is for notifications, that it be for any interested property within a 500-foot radius of a property seeking a change.
But you say corporate limits.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, but 500 feet is our current convention, and this is just codifying that and carrying it forward so that everyone that is currently being notified will be notified going forward under the new ordinance as well.
Okay, let me ask you, go back to 2.5.
Yes, ma'am.
Change community development department to the engineering department.
Yes, that is one of the committee memberships. Mistakenly, the community development department was on the list. It should have been the engineering department, not the community development department. That's on that, that was the technical review committee membership.
We're not changing the name, they just have
Not
the
naming,
wrong-
yeah, just the wrong department was referenced.
Oh,
It's
gotcha.
supposed to be the engineering department that's on that committee, not the community development department.
Okay, okay.
So yeah, it's just, yeah, the
Oh,
wrong department got
Okay,
listed, so
okay.
that one was just a typo.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Let's see. So we went over the site plan. The next few are just reflecting those changes, of the site plan. Let's see. The next few are just kind of procedural things, cleaning up references. Some of the text in those next sections got carried forward from the old ordinance, and the references didn't get updated. So there were a couple that referenced the building department director, and that should be just the director, which references the current structure of the city, and the director being the development director. So again, those are just kind of clerical changes there. Let's see. The next one to take note of, page 2-36, the administrative adjustments table, removing the minimum open space set aside area from something that is allowed to have an administrative adjustment. It would be best for that to only be allowable under a BOZA review and not be at the discretion of an administrative change. It seems minor, but that's something that really needs BOZA review and not be left to an administrative procedure.
Where are you again with that, please?
Sir.
236.
236.
Yeah.
All right.
Second one.
Let's see.
So if we want less open space, then those that has to put the ground.
Let's see. All right, the next one is page 3-27. Changing the maximum building height to 55 feet, to lesser of 55 feet or 4 stories. And that is a reference to the CC district, and is really just a reflection of modern building codes and building practices and kind of where we see current development form is at, for that district. 3 stories is gonna be too restrictive, 4 is gonna be more realistic of current development practices.
We'll get 4 stories in 55 feet.
Yes, that's the typical convention is 3 stories, you look at about 45 feet, 4 stories, 55. Any questions on that? Like I said, that was more about looking at current development and trying to keep us as modern as possible on that front. Yes, ma'am.
Is this also in the institution districts also?
The institution district, so that, are you asking about the heights on that one? So that is,
I thought it was already for
let's see, find that page for you. The institutional district, that is at 80 feet or 6 stories.
Okay.
The reason you see that in the institutional district is because that's where we put hospitals.
Okay,
And
gotcha.
so we have to allow them the height,
Right,
for
okay.
that.
Okay.
Can we go higher?
I don't know that I would recommend that at this point. The good thing about a zoning ordinance is it can be changed in the future. You know, there's a procedure for that. So a lot of times it's best to, you know, if we see an issue in the future, we can easily adjust and make that higher if we need to. I don't see us having that problem. I think 6 stories should be adequate. But if it does,
The hospital area, the other one's 50 feet. The 4 stories?
that one, so that really is more about, you know, right now, building materials, most developments in that CC district are gonna wanna use all wood framing, mainly due to expense. And currently, building codes do not allow all wood framing to exceed 4 floors in height. So that's where that 4-floor cap kind of comes from these days. If you see a lot of hotels that go up these days, a lot of development, apartment complexes, most of them you'll notice, if you take a look, will be capping out at about 4 stories these days. It's all due to that building code restriction on allowing the all wood framing.
I have a question about that. With the INSTMC being incorporated into the institutional.
Yes.
I think that the institutional will actually be, we'll need to make sure they know it's gonna be either 100 feet or 8
Yes.
stories. And
Which
instead of-
that we, you know, the only building currently in the city of Decatur that would be taller than 6 floors is the one you're in right now. Tom, you could probably, I'm not aware of another building in town. The hospital is 6 floors. The Progress Bank building is 6 floors. the People's Bank building, I believe, is 6 floors. The building you're in right now is the only one that currently exceeds 6 floors in height, just to give you kind of an idea of the scale of that.
So in that CRCC, somebody wanted to go above 4, can we allow that?
CR allows for 6 floors, and that's why we were recommending that change along the belt line, is the belt line can handle the extra height. The CC is where our current B2 zonings are, and so it's more appropriate for the 4 floors being the cap on that one.
If the cap is 4 stories and somebody wanted to go higher and not use the wood framing, use the steel or metal framing, is that, can we make that happen somehow?
If in the future, you know, we start seeing that be a thing, most of the time where you will see somebody want to exceed those heights are gonna be out on the belt line or in our downtown areas where we already allow the extra height.
But if they ask in that other zone, can we make that happen, or does that have to be a change?
Potentially, and that's one thing that has to be looked at going forward. You know, we weren't always the best in the past about, you know, keeping up with these changes, but one of the things that, you know, is the intent is going forward, we're staying on top of building trends and making sure that we're staying in line with them. You know, Tom can probably speak to this a little more too. There are advances in wood framing techniques, and there is a push to allow for greater height with timber frame structures. But right now, the cap is at 4, so it's best for us to kind of use that as our guiding principle currently. If it changes in the future and we see that we need to react to it, then we can make those changes.
Sir, I'm a little hung up on this, so if they're in an area where we can go forward, and somebody comes in and says, I wanna go 6, can I do that? Is their answer no?
So there are zoning districts that would allow it, so the first.
It's not in that district.
If it's not in that district, then it would not be allowed. They could seek a variance if they can prove a hardship for needing that height. But the course of action would be to seek a rezoning for one of the districts that does allow for the extra height.
They could work.
There is recourse,
There is
yes.
a way to make a.
There is recourse, yes.
exception if we came about it.
Yes, so, and like I said, if we started seeing, you know, a large number of cases coming to us needing that extra height, then that's when, you know, it needs to be looked at. Well, we need to reevaluate and look at text edits at that point.
But you could basically make that case for anything, setbacks, you know, front yard setbacks or anything. So, you know, the ordinance is the starting point, and
The
that's what.
hardship is hard to.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, the difference in 4 stories and 6 stories in the zoning districts is the same as the front yard setback between 2 single-family districts as well. You know, they're set at a number, and that's what we hold to.
And it's
But we
more.
can always evaluate our zoning ordinance and make a change to it. And I would think with this, there's gonna be several things that once we start using it, that are gonna arise that we are gonna need to change.
And it's more thinking about the scale as well. So your CC districts, a lot of times, are closer to residential districts than what the CR district is. So you really don't want to allow, you know, excessively tall structures too close to residential districts like that. So it's more about the scale and where those districts are located and the intent of those districts. The CC are meant to be a little closer to residential districts than the CR zoning is. So that allows for a little extra height in the CR because it won't be, you know, intrusive onto a single-family residential neighborhood.
Just make sure I'm understanding. If I'm in a place that's zoned for 4 stories and I wanna put 5, the answer's not a hard no. It's no, but there are options.
But there are
we
options.
can look at, there's a way to explore possible.
Yes. Yes, there are. All right. Let's see. Let's see, that's more administrative. More administrative things. Like I said, at this point, a lot of this is just like small administrative tweaks, typos, those kind of things.
I have a question about the second bullet point on page 3,
Yes, ma'am.
3-51.
Yes.
Where it says the planning department shall review all completed and approved permit applications. Does that mean all completed and approved permit applications for that one particular business?
Yes, for the sidewalk. That's a reference to sidewalk cafe applications. Some of the wording got off a little bit. This reflects how it currently works, which is the planning department takes the applications for those and processes them for compliance, and then gets the sign off from all the other departments required. And then the last sentence of that is that after compliance has been verified, the planning department issues the license,
But when
which
you-
is how it currently works.
So when you say all applications, is it all applications from all the businesses that
Each
are
bus-
applying?
Each
or-
business applies individually, yes. So all applications only in reference to sidewalk cafe applications.
So all sidewalk cafe applications for, if there's 100 businesses that have sidewalk cafe applications, the planning department is reviewing all of those 100
Yes.
applications.
And that's just a reference to the planning department takes those applications and does the processing of those applications.
Oh, I got you. So any
Yes, and this was just,
application,
this edit was just cleaning up some wording to correctly reference how that process works and how it needs to continue working.
okay,
So currently, how that works is you want to apply for a sidewalk cafe license, you make that application with the planning department, and then the planning department processes and works the approval through the other departments. And then, once approval is granted, then the planning department is who issues the license.
Well, the planning department reviews as well.
Yes. Which, like I said, is how it currently works. This is just cleaning up a little bit of wording that got messed up a little bit.
A quick question on 4.3, table 4.3.
Sure.
The dorms and the training event centers being added as special exception in like dorms in CB and the other centers in I districts. Why is it listed as a special exception? And
It just allows, so what the special exceptions do is, we currently call that a use on appeal. So if you have a use in a zoning district that has the potential to cause maybe a little disruption or a little discomfort to neighboring uses, then you give it the special exception, and it just requires them to come to the Board of Zoning Adjustment so that there is a public review and deliberation on if that use is appropriate, taking in the context of the surrounding uses.
okay.
So like on a dorm in the CB, since CB doesn't have a parking requirement, you would want to review that. Something, that may be the issue.
I think you think of a special exception as just like asking the board for permission.
Yeah.
That's all.
It's an extra step added in there to make sure that there's, that the public of the neighboring properties are notified, because like I said, in most cases, it is usually uses that have the potential to cause disruption to,
That makes sense with the event center and training
Yes.
centers. Yeah.
yes.
I think we've had issues with this where BOZUS had something to approve, and it's not listed one way or the other in the uses permitted on appeal. And it's just something no one anticipated someone having a business for in a particular district. Like we had a florist, we've had there's just been like a hairdresser near the hospital. There's been some weird little things that
it's just a way out.
So I think it's, we're trying to, at least whenever Lee and I both have reviewed it, we were just trying to come up with what businesses might be out there that weren't included in here, that could come forward and say, hey, we need to have this. This is consistent with these type of businesses. It's just not something someone anticipated. We've had that happen
We have,
with those,
yes.
where people come and there's nothing there at all to say, we want it or we don't want it, and there's no guidance. So you kind of have to
And
think
while,
of everything.
and while we can't possibly think of everything and get everything included, we try to have as wide a range as possible so that when interpretations have to be made, you can more easily make those interpretations if there are a wide enough list of uses in there, if you cover enough ground. Right after that, one thing to point at is sale of alcoholic beverages. In your current draft, that's listed as on the primary use table. That just needs to be moved to the accessory use table. And how that is handled is alcohol is considered an accessory use. So what the principal or primary use that is allowed is what determines if an alcohol license can be obtained, not what's on that accessory use table. So if a bar is allowed, then they can request a bar type license. If a restaurant is allowed, they could get a restaurant type license. So that got incorrectly put on the principal use table. It needs to move to the accessory use
So
table.
if you look at page 4-5, that's where it is. Should come out of that.
And again, that's just more for the administrative side of things, making sure that that we've got that a little more clearly listed. Let's see. The next one of note to really take a look at, page 4-6, self-storage indoor. So recently, self-storage has kind of taken on a new form, which is the wholly indoor, single building type self-storage, not the old type you see that was spread out with just rows and rows of garage doors. So to try to keep on top of that, we are going to get that included as its own type, and because it would be appropriate in some districts that the other type of self-storage would not be appropriate in. So that is something to take note of as well, that we are trying to account for the differences in an indoor self-storage operation versus the outdoor self-storage operations. Let's see. A lot of the next ones are just things that came up that were differences from the current ordinance. Like I said, we want the new ordinance to be as close to the old ordinance as possible, just more modern, so that any major changes are their own separate conversation and have the public scrutiny that they need. Let's see. On the next page, these are all, let's see.
So 421, small loan establishments
Yes.
closer than 1,500 feet, are we talking about title loans?
Title loans, pawn shops, any of the deferred presentment services, all of those, are required to be spaced,
Yeah.
1,500 feet apart, which is our current, in our
Correct.
current ordinance, it got omitted, so this is just making sure that that's carried
Yeah.
forward. Page 4-41, as you go down that list, is one to take note of. We currently require, mobile food vendors to be 100 feet away from any building that houses an eating or drinking establishment. We are wanting to add in an exception to that, where if the restaurant or, if the eating or drinking establishment provides in writing their, exception to that, then they would be allowed to be closer. So we do wanna, try to be a little more flexible in our current, handling of that situation.
Is this doing hours of operation as well?
It's just for food trucks, so
Doing hours of operation or after hours of operation?
all hours, yeah, we don't specify. And so, yeah, just allows, a little more flexibility where we're not so flexible currently.
Does an email or text message count as written?
If it is in writing and can be verified that it is from the owner of the establishment, then we would consider that in writing. Let's see.
I guess I'm thinking about late night being the trucks who operate, or the late night.
Well, we have hours that they're not allowed to operate after, so that kind of doesn't, we don't allow late night after hours for food trucks.
Like 11 o'clock.
11 o'clock is the latest that they're allowed to operate. I believe that's the
I
current
think it is 11.
ordinance. Okay, here's an area that was kind of brought up in the public meetings, and it dealt with parking in the residential area.
Let me go back to that one we were just talking about.
Yes,
So eating and drinking establishments, if there's 3 in that 100 feet, all 3 of them have to.
yes, yes.
2 of them do,
2 of them
one says
couldn't get,
no.
yeah, no. If they're within 100 feet, any eating or drinking establishment within that 100 feet would have to give approval, yes.
Okay,
Um,
sorry.
Let me ask you this.
Yes, ma'am.
All food trucks, no matter what the event is, they shouldn't be open to after 11 o'clock, right?
I believe that is the current ordinance. I'll have to verify that for you, but I believe that is our current ordinance.
Okay.
It is not after 11 PM, but I will get you follow up on that.
You will need to make a note of that for the all, because that will change the way it's worded on here.
Potentially.
When it talks about any, it needs
Yes.
to be changed to all, so that that's
Yeah,
Yes,
clear.
yeah.
that is a good, all right, I'll make that note real quick so I can change that. You have extra pen, sure.
You can use this one.
Should it actually say any and all,
I would,
located
All.
a minimum of 100 feet from any and all buildings, housing, and food establishment?
all will cover, yeah.
You and Ruth can come up with.
Yeah, we can,
Make sure
we'll,
they
we'll,
cover
yeah,
it.
we'll,
Second.
I think all will be a better, yeah.
Say any here, but then
Mhm.
all there.
Um,
In both places here,
Yeah,
any and all, in both places.
yeah, same thing.
Page 5-4, there were a couple of comments that were received on that one where there was a little confusion on what that one. So that is in reference to, let's see, mid-block right-of-way connections. There was a little confusion on what that actually looks like, so we are requesting that they put us in a figure to better illustrate that, because like I said, anything like that where anybody has come to us and said we're a little confused by what that means, we want to make sure we're getting as much clarity on that as possible, because like I said, we want this to be as easily read and understood by the public as possible. So we do want to get an illustration in there for that. The next thing to kind of bring to your attention is the parking requirements in residential districts, because there was a little bit of this that was brought up in the public comments and in the last meeting we had on this. There are several changes we're looking to make in this section just to make it more clear and, you know, make sure that it's as easily understood as possible. Let's see. Driveways excluding the parking areas, so just your driveway leading up to your parking area shall not exceed 12 feet in width. That's just, you know, all of these are trying to make sure that, you know, most of your parking is contained to the sides of the house as possible, and that not too much of your front yard is taken up by parking area. That's where a lot
Well,
of
let me ask this, your driveway can actually be wider than 12 feet, but if it is, it counts toward that
counts towards your
parking
parking
space.
area.
Yeah,
Yes.
so if it's 14 feet wide,
That's your parking area.
part of that
Yes.
counts in the parking area.
Mhm. So this allows for the long driveways in some of the larger districts too, where you don't want, you know, your driveway to be counted as your parking area, which is what the wording was kind of implying. So we wanted to make sure we got that distinction in there, that there are exceptions for long driveways like that leading up to a driveway, a house that's set further back off the road.
And I think a big thing that a lot of people didn't understand, that this is only talking about parking in the front yard.
Yes.
It doesn't regulate.
It doesn't, yeah, it
rear
doesn't
yard or
regulate
side yard.
rear or side
Side
yard
yard.
parking. This is only in reference to front yards.
Yep.
There's also an item that's needed to be added on this, that trailers, trailered vehicles and recreational vehicles may be parked within driveways and parking areas, but shall not be parked or left within the public right-of-way except for the purposes of loading or unloading. So just making clear that any trailers or trailered vehicles or RVs, anything like that, is parked off-street and not within the public right-of-way. Another thing that came up is the issue of parking in grass. And one thing that was brought up was, well, what about a party I'm having and I want, you know, people to have enough places to park. So we did want to add in an exception that parking in areas not clearly defined as a driveway or a parking area is allowed, but not for periods of more than 24 hours. So if you are having a party, having a large gathering over, and you need some extra parking and want to allow people to park in the grass, there are exceptions for that on limited basis. Because that was one thing that did come up through the public comment process.
And on the RV loading, unloading, was there a time on that?
There
You
is,
said 24 on that, what was it on the loading?
there is not currently, it's just they need to be in the process of being actively loaded or unloaded if they're gonna be parked in the public right-of-way. If they are being parked for any kind of storage for any period of time, they've gotta be off the public right-of-way.
So Lee, I think you mentioned that only a certain percentage of the front yard can be used for
Yes,
parking area.
yes.
So somebody goes out and they pave their entire grass in their front yard, then what happens?
They will be subject to enforcement actions by the city, using all of the enforcement mechanisms that we have at our disposal. So that could be anything from, typically, the first thing that would happen is you'd receive a letter stating that you've done something contradictory to the zoning ordinance and what is allowed, and you would be asked to remove it. If you don't, then it would get into enforcement actions.
But people that have already done that are grandfathered?
Yes.
Okay.
We'll go
They
back
would-
to the
So
loading.
my next door neighbor did it 10 years ago, and then I try to do it because I can't park on the grass anymore.
Yes.
Then I have a problem.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Back to the loading and unloading. So if I put a suitcase in there every day, unloading,
There are, always going to be challenges to enforcement, and that is one of them is people get creative.
well, I just wonder if we ought to put that, we put the 24 hours for.
We can look at that
or
if-
maybe
if
just add
that's-
something like that.
If that's something that y'all think would be wise to do, I'm certainly open to that and saying loading not for a period of more than 24 hours. If that,
Well, I think it'd be okay if you not only loaded a suitcase, but then unloaded a suitcase.
Yeah, the next.
Took one on and took one off each day, then you'd be okay.
It's like
You're
your chicken and
actively-
granny fox.
Yeah, you're going both ways.
Yeah.
So you're loading in.
Just gotta keep one at the front door.
Yeah.
well, and
Well,
I might.
it'd be easy to just put a time limit.
Well, and
Yeah.
I might would in these cases recommend more than 24 hours, and I would be open to if you would think 36 or 48 might be more appropriate. Taking into consideration moving, sometimes you get there, and park the truck, and then you have a day of loading, and then you take it back the next day. It might be wise to give, and it might even be better now that I'm thinking through it, maybe 72 hours. And that would just give somebody, it's basically a weekend of.
So your in-laws can park their RV in the driveway for the
I think
weekend.
then we have to change the wording of loading and unloading, because you could do loading and unloading for 72 hours, then do another 72 hours. You have to take something out to put the 70, I think it just needs to be a time frame then. Does that make sense? Because then you've
Yeah.
got that same argument, only it's given them longer to unload and load. So I think you just need to have, maybe if we change it, just make it a time frame, period.
Yeah.
Except for the fact that, the construction that's down here on, First has one, and so that.
Well, there are
They have a
construction
different-
exceptions for.
Right, but
yes.
that's part of this, it says part of temporary construction activities, we need
Yes.
to distinguish between that then,
Yes.
so that they're not,
Mhm.
whatever we do, we just need to make sure.
So I guess that would be a good edit to maybe look at is
Loading, unloading, just put a time.
Time.
Well,
instead
or-
of,
And then the temporary construction activities needs to be separated out, so it's not construed with the 72 hours.
Mhm.
They're obviously gonna need longer, it just needs,
mhm.
the wording just needs to make sure it doesn't prevent something that's needed from happening.
So I guess what I would recommend is maybe instead of, for the purposes of loading or unloading, change that to except for periods of less than, and here was where I would be looking for feedback on, like I said, 24 may be too long for, like I said, I'm thinking about, moving someone with a U-Haul, moving in. It may need to be for a period of not more than 72 hours, unless as part of temporary construction activities.
I like the weekends off, like you
I
said,
do.
put in Friday through
Mhm.
Sunday.
Yeah, I do too.
I would be worried that 24 would not be enough.
And I think most people wouldn't have, like if somebody in an RV came to your house for the weekend, that
And
most
needed to
people
park
wouldn't have
it,
a
yeah.
problem with it sitting there for the weekend or 3 days.
But for, weeks at a
Forever.
time is.
Right, weeks at a time, or that's a different story.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So it's a
So
good
you're-
compromise
okay.
for both sides, I think.
All right, I will change that note then, we'll look at so we'll change that to except for periods of less than 72 hours unless as part of temporary construction activities.
Then I'm gonna make it even further, so I'll move it for an hour and bring it back. There's always a way around, right?
Yeah, and then I have a question going back to the bullet point before
Yes, ma'am.
that. Not more than 24 hours per occurrence.
Yes.
So, okay, I'm having a Super Bowl party and I have cars parked on my grass for 24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so beyond the 24 hours, I'm just trying to figure out how this works in all practicality. Does somebody knock on the door and say, you know, what's going on here? You got these cars, and they say, oh, we had a death in the family.
Mm-hmm.
And they say, oh, okay, so then you got 24 hour. You know, I'm just wondering how that works
Yeah.
practically if you have cars there parked for more than 24 hours. Do they just get a ticket and then they come back and say, well, we had a funeral, and they say, okay, it's excused because.
Well, I mean, it's, you know, it's like with any other enforcement action of the city, they are, you know, they would have to give proof of what they are saying as well. So it's not just as simple as just saying, oh, well, there was a, you know, funeral, you know, there, if you're doing this and a vehicle is observed in your front yard outside the parking area, you know, twice in a 48-hour period, then you are potentially going to be, you know, called out on this, and you'll have to provide proof of why. And so that's kind of how enforcement works in those cases.
So the enforcement officer sees the cars here, they've been here for 3 days, so do they knock on the door and ask somebody, why are these cars here, or do they just give them a ticket and then it's handled?
So it really depends on who observes it and does it. So if a code enforcement officer does it, they will handle it a certain way. If a police officer observes it, they would handle it another way, you know, because their enforcement are just different. So it's hard to say that this exact thing will happen because there are multiple enforcement actions and forms that could take, just depending on who does the enforcement.
Okay. It just seems like a big loophole. Because, and the reason why I bring that up, there are some people who always have a lot of cars on the front, in the front yard.
Yes.
And so if the rule is it can't be for more than 24 hours per occurrence, then I have a different occurrence every 24 hours. And who
sets the
says
clock?
that it's,
Yeah.
Who sets the clock?
right, who says that this occurrence is valid or not valid? I mean, you know,
And
I
that's-
answer the
and
door
like I
and
said,
say, oh, I had whatever, and then the enforcement officer says, oh, okay,
Wonder if you
it's
just let it-
allowed.
You just implement it and see if it's abused, and we can find all those loopholes and close them in. I don't know what the, it'd be hard to
And that's the
find
thing,
out.
it's.
What is our
it's-
goal
Our,
on all of this?
our goal is to make sure that that, you know, you're parking on your hard surface and not on your grass and in the front yard. Side yard, rear yard, you're fine. And that's the thing is, you know, a lot of this is, you know, the inconvenience of dealing with not complying with it is going to say, well, why don't I just park in the side yard or in the rear, and I'm not gonna have this problem. You know, a lot of it is that more gentle encouragement of, hey, you know, you've got other options here, don't park in the front yard in your grass. You know, if you're gonna do that, side or rear yard.
I mean,
There's difficulty in drafting an ordinance.
It is.
yeah, it
Yeah.
is,
It's just like all of our
yeah.
laws.
Somebody's
There's
gonna
be someone
find
who's
a way.
gonna assert something that follows the letter of the law, but
And then, like Forrest said too, you know, that's, I'll say it again, that's why zoning ordinances have the procedure for changes to be made, is if, you know, we see a problem, we can respond to it and make changes.
So when you create an exception for anything, that's when you bring in to
Yes.
the possibility of all these factors that we're talking about.
Yes.
Be real easy to say, you know, you gotta park in the driveway or behind the house.
Mhm.
You can't
Yeah.
park in the front yard.
Yeah.
But you're leaving the exception open for certain circumstances that has the potential to get abused.
It does. And the hope
You
is
just have
that
to
it
figure
won't.
out how to deal with
You know,
it.
the hope is that it won't get abused. That's
Yeah.
always the hope, you know, and if it does, then we'll respond to it in a,
Let me ask you this.
yes, ma'am.
Now, on the corner, the side yard is right on the front?
So, those,
some of the
so if you're on a
corners.
corner lot, your side yard is subject to front yard requirements as well on corner lots. Because they front two streets, we call those double frontage lots.
Okay,
And so technically, in that case, your side yard is a front yard as well.
okay. So they can do on the grass, they don't have to put sidewalk or gravel, they can do the grass?
On
Oh.
rear yards
No, on that
and
side yard, 'cause I have no
away
exactly
away
one.
from the corner street. So on the other side of the house, they would be able to. But in that case, you're on a corner like that, that's a double frontage lot.
Okay,
And
so
so.
they're okay,
Yes.
okay.
Oh, they're both front yards.
Yeah.
They
So you
can't
can't
park in
park.
either one of them, the
You
front
can't
or
park
the
on-
side.
Unless
That faces
it's
another
driveway
street.
or parking area
Yeah.
in that case.
It is a driveway, it's a driveway.
Yes. It can be on the
And
side.
then you got a side street
Yes.
on the side,
Yes.
and it's right at the front yard.
Yes,
So
that's,
that's okay, what I'm
that's,
saying.
it's still considered the front yard,
Okay.
yes, because it abuts a street.
Right, okay.
All right. Let's see, move on down through. Let's see more, just kind of clarifying things here. One comment that did come in was about landscaping timeframes. Page 5-38. We were currently requiring that landscaping be completed and approved within 6 months. We're looking to change that to 9 months to allow for growing seasons. 6 months was gonna be a little too restrictive and potentially push you out of growing seasons to meet that requirement. We wanna make sure that when the landscaping is going in, it's going in at appropriate times. So that needs to be changed from 6 to 9 months.
Okay, this is after the building's so completed.
After the building is completed, we
9
allow you to bond, those landscaping improvements if you can't get them,
Then-
done when you're, before you're wanting to open.
Mhm.
We'll allow you to put a bond in place, and then you just have a time frame to
Okay,
complete them.
gotcha.
So like I said, we wanna make sure that when they go in at the right time,
Right.
and,
You right?
you don't want them going in just to try to meet that time frame if it's not within an appropriate growing season.
Yeah.
Is 9 months enough?
Should be, because you have, in this area, we have 2 growing seasons. You have a spring planting season, you have a fall planting season. So 9 months should get you into one of those windows to get those plantings done. Let's see.
Can you talk about the changes on option 3?
Yeah, the next one, also on page 538 and 539. The option 3 on buffer types that is allowed for, the minimum width needs to be changed to 8 feet, and it needs to be, and 6 medium trees need to be added to the minimum plantings. The more important thing to note here is that option 3 needs to require Board of Zoning Adjustment approval. So options 1 and 2 are just allowed. You can choose either one of those. For option 3, that's something that needs a special exception, and the Board of Zoning Adjustment needs to look at that before granting approval.
And we're adding the 6 trees per 100 feet, and so you still keep the shrubs, you just have to add the 6
Adding
trees.
6 trees in there on top of the fence that is allowed for. Let's see. Typo. Oh, here's another thing. Some nuisance tree species need added to the list, and this came out of the public comments as well. Mimosas, hackberries, Bradford pears, Cleveland pears, and sweet gums all need to be added to the nuisance tree species list.
So I'm gonna go back to the BOZA. Where will you add this, on the chart or in the?
There will be a note on that chart that
chart, okay.
option 3 will require Board of Zoning Adjustment approval.
So that'll be under, like under that option 3, it'll.
Yes,
state
there will
that.
be a reference and a note that states that requires additional approval by BOZA. Let's see.
Now, adding
540, I'm sorry. go ahead.
excuse
Yes,
me,
ma'am.
adding these trees or deducting the trees with this will be consistent with the size of the lot.
So this is for, this is only for, commercial and multifamily residential areas, not single family or agricultural areas. This is only, in regards to the landscaping requirements for parking areas. So if you're doing a commercial project or if you're doing a multifamily residential project, it requires site plan approval. And these nuisance species are just species that are not appropriate for commercial
Oh, yeah, that's not what I was
applications.
asking you.
Yes, ma'am.
On, like an institution,
Yes, ma'am.
when the amount of trees, not,
Oh, yes, ma'am.
not these trees, but it depends on the size of the lot?
Yes,
Per
so,
100 feet.
yeah, for every 100 feet, there are a certain amount that are required.
Okay.
And that's, yes, so.
So
there
like it's
is-
6 per 100 feet, so if the buffer is 150 feet long, it's 9 trees.
Yes, so
Okay.
you have to increase as your lot gets bigger.
Gotcha.
Let's see.
Then 540, where we changed some from B to C, did you talk about that? The multifamily,
Oh,
single
yes,
family.
yes, so there are, so the buffer requirement between multifamily and single family, needs to be a C-type buffer, which is, the semi-opaque buffering. And that came from the public comments as well, and it's something the planning department does recommend making that change.
That would change to C.
Okay.
Let's see. The next thing to look at, 5-80, this table lays out, our stair stepping that we require. So if you have a district that allows for, higher, larger building heights, if you are within a certain distance of a single-family residential, we want you stepping up to that full height so that you don't just have, you know, a 4-story building towering over a 2-story single-family home. So to this table, we do also recommend adding a category for less than 25 feet and capping that at 2 stories, just so that we're achieving that good stair step and making sure that we're taking everything into account.
Just the 2-story, does it go 3 and 4?
So that is, so there will be categories for 2, 3, and then full height after that. And it's all about just distances away from an existing smaller structure. Let's see. Next page. We're getting into the sign stuff here. A lot of this is just changing a few words. Let's see.
We talk about the 5-95.
5-95. Okay, yes. So, in the UCMX district, which is our urban, mixed-use, district, we are looking at adjusting the setbacks and the maximum heights that are allowed, from what we currently allow. We worked with the engineering department to settle on these heights, because a lot of this is about sight distances and the heights of signs, making sure that, you know, with cross streets, your view around the sign is not obstructed. So we are looking at, we have quite a bit of BOZA applications for variances to these setbacks currently. And so working with the engineering department, we did come up with a way to ease that a little bit and hopefully cut down on the amount of variance requests that are sought for this district. Let's see, again, a lot of this is going to be just administrative typo type things. And then the last section are definitions. Going down through there, there are just a few words that need to be tweaked just to be a little more clear, and to make sure we've got a good definition in place, because all of our enforcement is based off of these definitions. Were there any in there that anybody had any questions about when you were going through them? Like I said, most of them were just a word here or there, just kind of adjusting, making them more clear. So I know that was kind of a lot to throw at you, but so though, based on where we're at, and like I said, taking into account those public comments that were received and provided to you, as well as one final review by the planning staff and by the legal department, these are the edits we recommend making at this point. Was there anything in here as you were reading through them or as we were going over today that you have any concerns with us moving forward on?
Can we take the remainder of the time and talk about some of the things that are obvious changes?
Sure.
Such as accessory dwellings?
Sure, so, like I said, and like I've kind of been trying to emphasize throughout this process, the intent of this zoning ordinance rewrite was never about large sweeping changes. It was more about modernizing our code, modernizing our processes, and just, you know, putting us in a position to where we can have conversations about large changes that need to be made going forward. So, you know, one thing that has been talked about a lot that is not in here is short-term rentals. So how we currently handle short-term rentals is how we will handle short-term rentals after this is adopted. But we do have a zoning text amendment that is ready for discussion as soon as this adoption process is over. So like I said, any large conversations like that, it was intended to keep those separate so that we could first modernize and then start tackling the real issues that need to be addressed going forward. To do that, there are things that needed to be added. One of them is neighborhood compatibility. And that's that whole section you see about the stair-stepping effect that I was talking about, the buffering standards. All of those things are in the category of what we call neighborhood compatibility. And so what you'll notice in there is, while it is new, it is also a very light touch. So that what we currently require and what we require after the adoption is not drastically different. If there are larger changes that need to be made to those neighborhood compatibility areas, they can be made at a separate time. It's more about introducing the concept into our zoning ordinance and then having discussions on changes that need to be made going forward to them. Because we do them currently, you know, we have buffering requirements, we have all of these things. They're just not grouped in one area like they are in the new ordinance. And so it looks a little different, it looks new, but like I said, the intent is to have a light touch and introduce the concept to our zoning ordinance, and then if there are larger changes that need to be made, to make them later. The format is a big thing in this, especially as far as making it more user-friendly. You know, one of the complaints we get about our current ordinance is it's just hard for the general public who doesn't know anything about zoning ordinances to pick it up and be able to use it easily. There's confusing wording, there's old wording that people don't even use anymore because it just hasn't been updated. So the use charts go a long way towards that. You can easily find the use that you have a question about and find out if it's allowed in what district. The figures that you see in the district explanations, giving you a visual of the setbacks, the heights, the form that those districts take, because we do get a lot of questions about what does that mean. So the hope is by providing more figures, more tables, that it's just easier for the citizens to pick it up and more easily get their questions answered. We want to be as helpful as possible, and we think these changes go a long way towards that. Yes, ma'am.
This might be a variant from it's not really from what we're talking about, but I did not see anything, and I might have missed it.
Yes, ma'am.
Grandfathering these lots in, don't meet the new code?
We do. So we have it, language in there for that. Any lot that exists currently, and we have that in our current ordinance too. Any lot that is in existence is allowed to continue as long as the lot is unchanged. If the lot is changed, it would have to come into conformance. But as long, you know, if you had a 5,000 square foot lot, but the minimum in that district is supposed to be 7,000 square feet, your lot can continue and you can build on that lot.
Okay.
You do enjoy that grandfather status. You can use your lot, but if changes are made to your lot, they then have to be brought into conformance. So like if you're combining with another lot, you couldn't make a new lot less than what that district allows.
Right, okay.
And
Would that change setbacks?
No, so setbacks are still the same,
and
yes.
some of the things on grandfathering, like a building that was non-conforming, used to you couldn't do anything to it. Now there's percentages that you
Yes.
can do to it before you have to bring it totally into conforming. So the way we are now, a non-conforming building, there's no reason to, a lot of times you can't do maintenance on it. You can't spend any money on it to keep it safe, but in the new one you can. A few other changes, the CB or B5 restaurants will be permitted instead of on appeal.
Trying to be more, you know, thinking more about the modern city and how we handle things. It's better for that to just be allowed because, you know, we want restaurants downtown. That's not, I don't think there's any question about that now like there used to be where we need a little extra, you know, attention paid to that.
We don't allow accessory dwellings in single family now, currently.
That's
But
another
the union
thing,
does.
that's another thing is, bringing back accessory dwelling units. And we are not unique in the fact that in the post-war era, most cities in this country wrote accessory dwelling units out of their zoning ordinances, and we did the same. And now there is a shift to bring that back, but in a more limited fashion. So what we're looking at in the city of Decatur is bringing back accessory dwelling units, but in what we call aging in place provisions. So you are allowed to build accessory dwelling units in your rear yards under the new ordinance, but they are not allowed to be rented. They can only be owner occupied. So like I said, that's our aging in place provisions. Being
They have
able
size
to,
limit too,
yes, being able to stay in your home in just a new fashion. You know, you can build a smaller unit out back, live in that. You're not displaced just because you can't live in your large main house anymore. It's kind of a growing trend across the country, and we're trying to be as reactive to that as possible.
You might also be a mother-in-law suites.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
900 square feet.
900 square feet is the maximum on that.
Attached or detached?
Both. So the accessory dwelling units take both forms, either attached or detached. In most cases, they're detached, but there are some cases where they will attach them.
You know the difference, if it's attached, then your setback changes.
Yes. So if it's attached, it is subject to your setbacks of your primary structure. If it's detached, it follows the setbacks for the accessory structures.
Okay, then non-dwelling accessory structures, we put some size requirement for that as well.
Yes, so there are,
Pardon?
Maximum.
Maximum height.
yes, maximum height and
And
maximum,
maximum size in relation to the main home, right?
yes, that's the main things,
70, it can't be any taller than the main structure, I think I'm correct.
yes,
And 75%
of the
the
primary structure.
primary size.
I think that's.
Or is
where
it
we landed on that one.
50%?
I think it was 50% actually, no more than 50% of the,
75 is huge.
Huh?
yeah.
75 is big. in the
Yeah, I think it's 50.
Yeah, I think it
it's
is 50.
50%, yes. But yeah, there are,
But we do, currently, we don't have that, and that's been an issue.
Right.
so, and like I said, any changes like that are just, you know, minor at this point. Anything large scale changes, will come later in their own separate discussions.
Then we have some facade requirements that we don't currently have in our commercial districts.
What department?
Facade,
Oh,
glass.
Facade, yes. So that's gonna be new as well, is, in our commercial districts, for the first time, we will have some facade requirements where we do not currently. We're not really mandating materials, but we are mandating,
But we do have some restriction on material as well.
Well, we have restrictions on material as far as if you have one material, it continues around the corners and across the whole facade. So it's continuous and not, you know, random changes in materials. But we don't say that, you know, you have to use any one specific material for your facade. We just require that they be consistent
We
across.
do have some districts that do not allow just regular corrugated steel
Yes,
buildings.
yes, we do have a few districts that do say there are some facades that you can't use, but we don't say that you have to use one specific type. There are just a few minor things that we say you can't. Corrugated steel is one of them, except for decorative metals, those kind of things. But that's kind of new, as far as, because we do not currently have any facade requirements. Another thing is breaking up the horizontal plane. So for every certain amount of feet of facade, you offset by a couple feet just to break up that visual plane. We do not currently have many requirements for large commercial developments. So we do have a new section for if you exceed a certain size of development, there are more requirements that kick in that we do not currently have, as far as how you do your drive aisles, how you do your landscaping, those kind of things.
What about tiny houses?
So that is driven by our building code, not by our zoning ordinance. So tiny houses are, there is a limit to how small a house can be built based on the building code. And it all comes down to, there are in the International Building Code specific requirements for certain rooms to be of a certain size. And so that kind of limits how small you can actually go. We do not allow the prefabricated off-site, like trailer pulled tiny homes. We do not allow that. We don't allow prefabricated off-site structures like that in residential districts, other than the manufactured home district, of course.
So are tiny homes allowed in manufactured home district?
Do what?
Tiny homes allowed in manufactured home
They
district?
would technically be allowed in that district, yes, but not just your typical single-family residential district.
They're not, tiny houses are not allowed in the single-family district.
No, ma'am.
Okay, so we don't have to worry about having one area, okay.
Yes, ma'am. They would be allowed in the manufactured homes district because they would technically fit the definition of a manufactured home, not a single-family dwelling.
Okay, and what is the smallest that you call a tiny house? What's the
I
measure?
don't know that we have a definite number on
'Cause
that. I would have to
I think I
check.
see a tiny house.
I would have to check with the building department on that. But like I said, the International Building Code requires certain rooms like kitchens, bathrooms, those things. There are a certain number of requirements that you have to have these rooms to be considered a dwelling, and that they have to be of a certain size. And so that kind of limits how small you can actually go on a dwelling that is built under our building codes.
But it's not supposed to be in the residential section, right? Tiny house.
The tiny houses, like the trailer-driven,
Not just
trailer pulled,
tiny
the
house
tiny house,
itself.
they would have to, the ones that, Ms. Burrows is talking about, they would have to be in a manufactured home district. They would not be allowed in single-family residential districts.
Point of information, the code does not regulate construction under 200 square feet. So a lot of tiny houses are in that kind of ballpark, 190, 200. So by exception, folks can go build 200 feet anywhere, any zone, any house, do whatever they want to.
And that's more building code driven than zoning code driven is
Because
how.
I think I seen one in a residential, I'm not sure.
If it's on-
That's why I asked what's the
If it's on
footage?
wheels and it's manufactured
No, it's not on
off-site
wheels.
and,
No, it's not on wheels, but it looked like a tiny house to me.
And see, and the reason why I bring that up is because this is becoming a big trend.
mhm.
And, you know, as rents get higher, that seems to be an option for a lot of people because it's cheap.
It may be
And-
something we need to look at, as far as the zoning text amendments, after the rewrite is done. That's certainly a conversation that I think needs to be had and could be a change that might need to be looked at. If it's something that we see becoming an issue or potentially being an issue, then I would certainly recommend that that's a discussion that needs to be had on, do we need to try to account for that?
But you
So
know
right
what?
now, if a developer came through and bought some land and it's in a residential district, could they put up a bunch of tiny houses?
No, because, and that's the thing, is you really, it wouldn't be economically feasible because, I mean, the smallest in a single-family residential you could go on a lot would be 7,000 square feet. So if you wanted to put a tiny home on a 7,000 square foot lot, that leaves a lot of open lot around you, and you can only have one dwelling on each lot. So you can't just come and put a bunch of tiny homes on one lot. You can only put one home on a lot.
But it wouldn't be considered an ADU?
Not if there's no primary structure.
So if you,
It can only be an accessory structure if there's a primary structure on the
okay,
site.
so you have 7,000 square foot lot, you have a primary structure,
And you can put one
You can-
accessory dwelling unit.
you can
on
only
it.
have one accessory, or ADU, okay.
So along that same line, you said that accessory dwelling structure can't be rented out.
Yes.
What if the homeowner moved in the accessory dwelling, can they rent out the primary?
Yes, they can.
Yep.
And those are the aging in place provisions
Okay.
that I was speaking about earlier. The intent of getting the ADUs back in is so if you have a situation arise where you potentially can't afford long-term care or don't necessarily need full long-term care,
Mhm.
but you can't maintain your large primary structure, one option for you would be to build a smaller structure in your rear yard. You occupy that, and you can rent out your primary structure in order to generate the, some excess revenue for
And the
yourself
setbacks
as well.
setbacks
It
side,
basically
that's all.
allows you to stay in your neighborhood and not be
Those are all
displaced.
based on the current setbacks for accessory.
Accessory dwelling units, for accessory structures, yes.
Yeah, fine.
And like I said, it's all about trying to keep people in their neighborhoods if they want to stay in their neighborhoods, and
So is
just
there
giving as
minimum-
many housing options as possible.
Is there a minimum lot size where you could put an accessory building in?
No, but there are size restrictions. So
You
they
mean
can be
acres?
no more than 50% the size of the primary structure,
Right?
not to exceed 900 square feet.
Then your lot would have to be large enough to make the setback.
And so to be considered an accessory unit, you have to be at least 5 feet away from the primary structure and at least 5 feet away from your property lines. So you'd have to have enough space to be able to do that. So we don't say you have to have a certain amount of space, but you physically would have to have enough space to do what you were wanting to do there.
But based on what this gentleman said, then I could go back there and build a house, an accessory dwelling less than 200 square feet.
It wouldn't be subject to building code, it would be subject to zoning code though.
Right.
So what he's talking about is only an exception to building code,
Yeah.
not zoning code.
I was wondering
But
about
we
that
don't have
too.
a minimum structure size in zoning.
No,
So you
so
could.
I could go back there and build a 200
That's right.
square foot
That's right.
place for me to live in and rent out my house.
You could, yes. And like I said, those are the aging in place provisions that we're trying to get in place. Unfortunately, it's becoming a more necessary reality as, you know, the years go on.
Sure.
People are
As
needing
boomers-
more
as
housing
boomers get
options.
older and older,
Yeah,
So
living longer and
it's
longer.
more
There are-
relevant for
it's-
some of us.
this is not an uncommon thing
Yeah.
that a lot of cities are doing and having to grapple with.
But Lee, you know what?
Yes, ma'am.
I think we need to really consider, think about now, those tiny houses
Mhm.
situations.
Mhm.
I think we need to start trying to put something in place and get ahead of it.
I think it's certainly a conversation that we can start. Yes, ma'am.
You talking about in the single-family residential districts?
Beg pardon?
You talking about in single-family residential districts? And being the primary,
Yeah.
You will have a zoning forum.
There's a lot of cities doing that for
Yeah, I
homeless.
think we
Oh,
need
yeah.
Things like that.
I've been a storage unit on, 31. There's a woman living in one of those storage units, and I'm sure she's not the only one in the city of Decatur. It's $59 a month.
Yeah.
And I thought, in this heat, but people are, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you've got a lot of homeless, so I guess they figure that's
Lot of
one
food.
step up from being homeless.
Another thing along those lines are the shipping containers.
So that is one thing I would point out is, there is, not allowed any, shipping container to be used as a construction material for a dwelling unit in the new zoning ordinance.
Or an accessory unit.
Or an accessory unit in a residential area.
So they can't use them for
That's in
storage,
this.
building. Yes, that's in this, can't use it for
So
storage.
none of those portable shipping containers
Right?
are not to be used as permanent.
That's good.
Regardless of how they're
Um,
converted.
Yes, no, there are dangers to those that people don't always take into account. They ship very hazardous materials in them. If you are going to use them, there are cleaning methods that should be employed. Most people do not. There's not a real good way for the city to ensure that has been done, so it is just better for them to not be used as a building material for a residence.
Okay, parking requirements in CN and CC changed. Behind the, 50% or more has to be to the rear of the building.
Yes, so that is new. So there is an effort in the new zoning ordinance to bring the structures forward to the street and moving parking to the rear. That encourages walkability, makes your districts feel more neighborhood-like, and encourages more, walking from one area to another. A lot of that is more just about visually encouraging walking from one place to another rather than, oh, well, I need to hop in my car to go from this one to this one, is where a lot of that comes from. Because if you're at a Walgreens and you need to go next door to another store, if you're parking lots and they're physically divided, most of the time you're just gonna hop in your car and you're gonna go. But if they're pulled towards the street and you exit out onto a sidewalk on the street and your parking lot's in the rear, you're gonna be more inclined to wanna just walk next door. So a lot of that, the CN and the CC districts, so the neighborhood commercial and the community commercial districts. It's all in an effort to.
B1 and B2.
It's all in an effort to try to make these districts, feel a little more neighborhood-like. And like I said, a part of that is also encouraging walkability between neighboring properties.
That would also facilitate the safety in doing that.
It does.
Where right now you may want to, but because of the way the parking.
There are
is
also
structured.
more encouragements for cross-parking agreements and combined parkings. We allow some offsets of your parking requirements if you partner with your neighboring property and you provide parking together. And that improves cross-access, limits the number of curb cuts, and also promotes walkability. So we do have a lot of that in there as well, that's kind of new. Things we encourage now, but don't really have any requirements for, we now have ways to actually, incentivize those behaviors.
And you can't have a parking stall that you turn right out of the street into.
Mhm.
So, you know how some of them, as soon as you turn in the drive, there's a parking stall that's parallel to the street.
Yep.
So you can't have that anymore. So you have to have where you stack, where you get off the road before you try to turn into a parking spot.
Some of the arrangement of parking areas is changing slightly as well. And a lot of that has to do with making sure there's adequate stacking, so that you're not, stacking out into a street or stacking up into your own development, those kind of things.
And
The-
lighting, talk about lighting some.
Lighting, so the new trend and what we're trying to do as well in the new zoning ordinance is to limit light pollution. And there's simple ways to do it, and what you'll notice in there is that the requirement for all lighting is to have cutoffs to where they shine downward and not up into the sky. And so what that does is that keeps the light contained to your site and lights what needs to be lit, but limits the amount that actually escapes your site. And they call that light pollution, and we do have efforts to try to limit that in new developments as well in the new ordinance.
What standards are they using?
It's all just about how it's not necessarily about the fixture type, it's how you aim it.
Well, it's full, it requires a full cutoff.
Yeah, full cutoffs so that they're cast down and not allowed to escape upward
Or
off of your
sideways.
side.
I didn't know if there was a lumens per whatever.
There, on wall packs does have a lumen maximum of 4,000 lumens,
And we do
which
have,
is also a cutoff. You can't have any more of the standard, which most buildings have an open face wall pack.
Right.
it
So
has
they all
to
have
be,
cut off.
it has to have a cutoff to where it's direct, the light is cast downward. It's all about, it's not necessarily changing what the brightness we allow, that still stays the same. It's just how you aim them and the cutoffs that are required now.
That's everything from commercial buildings to crosswalks to downtown luminaires.
That's the hope going forward, is that's the standard that we adhere to, is, trying to limit the light pollution as much as
So
possible.
for stadiums.
Now, are
Is
you
there an
planning?
exception for flags?
There are exceptions for flags, because that is, in the flag code, that lighting for flags is something, and that is an exception. There are small exceptions.
You can still have uplighting for signage
You can
too.
still have uplighting for signs, and it does not, you can't do it for lighting for softball fields and baseball fields, can't have those same cutoffs, so there are exceptions for things like that. But this is mainly for, your Walmarts and,
And you
commercial.
can't disperse lighting off your property.
Yes, so there are limits to how much lighting can leave your property, past your property boundaries as well.
Which is all pretty standard across the country now.
Is there anything else you
The
got?
other
there,
thing,
Kent?
chain link fence, we left that in there, right? The
Chain
vinyl
link
coated,
fences are not allowed
Except for vinyl coated.
except for vinyl coated, yes. So the exposed metal chain link is not an allowable fencing material for your, yard.
For new in construction?
Yes,
Oh,
so
okay.
the vinyl coated is still allowed in there, but just the raw metal, chain link, is not allowed as a fencing material.
In
I'm
every
glad,
district?
I'm glad you're allowing the coated because.
The coated is still allowed,
Yes.
yes.
But this is gonna be an enforcement thing.
It'll be
because
enforcement.
There's no permit required for a fence unless it's over 6 feet tall.
Even the front yard?
This is for new construction, or are we gonna try to enforce this?
New construction.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Yes. So anything that is done before this zoning code is, put in place, unless it is specifically stated that it is not, will enjoy grandfather status of however it was at the time of enactment of the
All
ordinance.
right, let me ask you this. Now, if you have a chain link fence, need repair, and you want to repair it or put it back, do we have to come back with the coding?
Yes.
Okay.
Does that apply only to residential or commercial districts as well?
Commercial, there are some fence types that are different for commercial than there are for residential.
Just the height.
And there are height differences that are allowed as well.
I think the
And
chain
I
link
think
is the
chain
same
link, I
on
think
all of
chain
them.
link is just except for security fencing for industrial districts is the only place that the raw metal chain link is allowed.
And athletic fields.
And athletic fields, yes.
And still have the regular.
But in the residential,
In the residential
if
districts,
someone come back and knock my fence down,
you
I
would not,
cannot go back with
you
my
wouldn't be
chain
allowed to
link.
replace it with just the raw metal chain link. You could if you did the coated metal, chain link fencing, but not the raw metal.
Something to talk about with your insurance.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
It's gonna be a hot button.
That's gonna be a mess.
Especially if you don't need a permit.
Was there any, I think.
Can you
I
think of
mean,
anything else?
I know we
tried to bring
covered,
up
I know we
everything.
covered a lot of ground today, and it seems a little overwhelming. But like I said, the intent of the new ordinance is not to be drastically different. It's just giving us new tools and allowing us to continue the conversation of the things that need to be changed as we go forward.
Let me make a comment
Yes, ma'am.
on the fencing again.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, see, now you know it's gonna cost a lot more in order to do this. And I'm just thinking you're gonna get the insurance problem. I'm just thinking, how are we gonna do this without?
There are exceptions.
Cause you know, in the older neighborhoods, that's all, that's
There
way,
are-
way back then, that's all we had was chain link fence.
There are exceptions in there for repair up to a certain percentage. I believe it's at 65% in the new ordinance.
Cause maybe you
so
know,
like
if you just got a
a
pole
tree-
leaning and you need to go back and, you know,
That
put
there
these
are-
little
yes.
clips and things, you
There
know,
are
you put
ex-
on to hold it
There
together.
are exceptions for repair. Full replacement, you would have to come into compliance.
Okay.
Repair over a certain percentage, you would have to come into compliance, but there are exceptions for repair up to a certain percentage of the total.
Okay.
So, yeah, you have a tree fall on a section of it, you can replace that section. You have a fence that, rusts and you have a post that rusts and needs to be replaced. Those kind of things you would be able to do.
Okay.
So there
But
are,
not just a full length.
they're not, yeah,
full.
there are with limits, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So repair is allowed, but there are limits to how much before
Okay.
you would have to come into compliance.
Then is this gonna require a license, permit to do it?
Not less than
To,
6 feet, it doesn't.
permitting
6 feet,
the
yes.
installation of fences.
The,
Currently, we do not require a building permit for any fence 6 feet or smaller. Anything over 6 feet tall, we do require a permit be obtained for that.
okay.
I was trying to ask, is that in front of the house as well?
So There are also fence standards as far as where the fence is. If it's in the front yard, it's not allowed to be more than 4 feet tall. If it's taller than 4 feet, it has to be behind,
The dwelling.
behind the front facade of the home.
Okay.
So
See, that's
that's,
gonna
that
bring up
allows you
another
to,
problem.
that allows you to still do the picket fence, the small fencing in of your front yard, but keeps anything taller than 4 feet to out of your front yard.
And you can't have the barbed wire on top of the 6-foot chain link fence unless you can show this for security reasons.
And has to come with a detailed security plan of why you need them and.
We're
order to
getting
get
too
those
many
things.
little restrictions for a change link fence, I think. I really do.
The fencing and the parking stuff there's gonna be issues.
There's gonna be
There's
issues, yeah.
So Lee, you mentioned,
Especially
That's
with,
why I wanted to bring it up.
that's right, especially with all these
you
people
mentioned
got.
short-term rentals a while
Yes.
ago. Where are we with that? I know we've been with that for a while.
So the planning commission and the city council, y'all work together to form the short-term rental committee.
Right.
That committee met over the last several months and has drafted a set of regulations, for short-term rentals. That committee has completed its work and we have that ready for presentation. What we're waiting on and what you'll see is adoption of the new zoning ordinance will come first. As soon as the new zoning ordinance is in place, then it would be immediately followed by that discussion and presenting of that proposed ordinance. So it would be a zoning text amendment is how you would see that. And it would happen immediately after adoption of the zoning ordinance.
Okay.
So it's formatted to plug right into the new ordinance. The new ordinance just has to get in place first. And it's a large conversation that needs to be held separately, with full public comment, all of that. So that's why it was decided to split that out and have a separate conversation on it. But it is ready to go and will be presented to the public, soon after the adoption of the zoning ordinance.
Okay, we've got about 5 minutes. Can you talk about the map?
The map, so yes, so now that the text is in place and we are ready to get our final edits done and get our final document back, what the text of this ordinance does is direct transitions. The new zoning districts, and their definitions were intended to be direct transition from old to new definition. And there's a table in there that shows you what the old district will transition to under the new ordinance. So by approving and adopting this text, it authorizes the direct transition of those zones from the old to the new, and a new map will then be created, and will be voted on as well. But the intent was to have every district have a direct transition from the old to the new, and a new map be created by the text. So if you are zoned single-family residential under the old, you are zoned single-family residential under the new. You will see, the average citizen will not see a difference from the old to the new. They will just have a new title. Instead of R3, it'll then now be RS7. And that is largely the only change that the average resident will see to their zoning district.
But there
Well,
are
now
two
this-
places where there is a difference. We're going from R4 to 2 multifamily districts.
Yes,
And then we're going from 2 redevelopment districts to 1.
to a single.
One single. And those, there are differences in the redevelopment. One is on the east side of Sixth Avenue, and the other one's on the west side.
And so
There's
they've
a
been
difference in the
combined
two.
into one while still keeping the requirements of both. So the
Well, one of
buffering that's required on Seventh Avenue under the current is still required under the new. So all of that is kept intact from the old to the new. It's just getting a new definition and transitioning to one district.
But one major difference there is the RD, which is the east side of Sixth Avenue, does not allow multifamily or motels. The new does.
Only above first floor commercial. Residential is only allowed above first floor commercial in that district. So it would have to be, you know, it would have to have a first floor commercial use in order to be allowed to do residential above it.
So it's a key
So
thing
it's
to
a
know
mi-
because
it's
there
a-
is some resistance to
It's a
that.
mixed use zoning, and the intent is to allow for the mixing of uses.
And that's on the east side of Sixth Avenue?
Yeah, the east side. is-
Where the current redevelopment districts are along Sixth Avenue. Those are becoming
RD,
mixed-use
RD2.
districts,
So
which
RD
was the
is
intent
the
of the
east side,
RD districts
RD2.
anyways.
No,
Which
RD
one
is the
located
west
we
side,
talking about?
RD2.
So,
Into one now.
Sixth Avenue, from the MAPCO development was one of the RD
Fifth through
development,
11th.
projects, the Walmart Market, the Walgreens, all of those came from the RD requirements, those, allowing, those to redevelop in a different way than what was currently there. So it's changing the name to be more reflective of, it's not really redevelopment, it's just, this is a mixed-use area where the mixing of uses is encouraged, commercial, office, residential, you know,
Well, it's
it's
just on Sixth Avenue.
just
now,
along
right?
Sixth Avenue.
Okay, gotcha.
Well,
So it's more about,
Country Club Golf Course.
that also got an RD, so that is, there are mixing of uses that's allowed there. And then a piece across the river, was given that zoning as well, to allow for the mixing of uses there as well.
So
So
not
it's-
just having commercial on the first floor, but the whole floor's gotta be a commercial use,
First floor.
First floor,
not
yes.
a part of it.
Mixing of uses. There are certain exceptions to that, but that's mainly just for the large tracks, not the small tracks along Sixth Avenue. So it's more about acknowledging what that RD district actually is, which is a mixed-use district. And it was just given the RD redevelopment name when it was developed. Now it's just recognizing it with a new name and what it actually is, which is a mixed-use district. But all the requirements are largely unchanged. The buffering required along Seventh Avenue is still required, and the impact on the surrounding, single-family neighborhoods is taken into account.
Anybody had something they read and said, uh-huh?
I know it's a lot to, throw at you. It's been a long process. We're, glad that we're getting close to the adoption phase now. It's been a long time coming. I, appreciate the work that everyone here has been willing to put into this long meeting. I apologize for
Well,
throwing all this at you, but it,
Well, I think you did very good.
I appreciate the work you put into it.
Yeah, you've
You
done a
put a
good
lot of
job.
work into it.
Yeah.
appreciate it.
So pat yourself on
All right, well, if that is all, the next thing that we will do is all of these edits, now that y'all have reviewed them and are good with them, we will send all these edits off to our consultant to make these changes, get us our final document, and we will start the adoption phase as soon as we have that back. So, the next thing you'll see is, an adoption of this document. Y'all will get it first for a recommendation, final approval will come from the city council. And once we get the final document ready, we'll also have the map ready, for, public viewing and for y'all's viewing as well.
So are there any more public comment periods?
At the adoption phase, yes, it is subject to public comment at that time.
Okay.
So we've already gone through multiple rounds leading up, and the hope was that if we did enough early on, there would, you know, it would take care of most of the public concerns on the front end. But yes, it is still open for public comment at the adoption phase.
And it's the same as zoning. We have a public hearing. We recommend, the council has two readings, right?
Yes. And so that's also why we wanted to make sure that y'all received every public comment that was received in that last round, so that y'all could see, you know, how they were addressed in these edits that we were proposing.
So, now make a point of order.
Sure, go ahead.
To that comment, I count 7 public comments that I made that were not addressed in the commentary.
Everyone that was submitted through the website was included on that list. We
Yeah.
pulled them straight from the website.
And we all have every one of your comments.
And I also got emailed some comments from you as well, I think. Everything that we received should have been included in that.
Yeah, I saw a bunch of yours.
I'm just making a point of order. I went through the commentary that you just provided. Thank you very much, it's very helpful. Comments from OneDecatur.org. I find that there are 6 and 7 that are not included in here, or 2 of them have been truncated.
Well, included in the changes, is that what you mean?
No, just included in the commentary.
In the comments, that
Well,
was
Go ahead.
pulled, everyone that was submitted through that website, we pulled them all down and included them in that list. If there was
I don't think you included everything in here, because if you didn't accept the comment for a change, it wouldn't be in this. This is just the changes.
that's just the edits based on that last round of public
Right,
comments.
so he may have
and
made a comment that
if it was
we
made in an
determined-
earlier round or at an earlier time, if you would send me an email, and I'll review those and.
What I'm talking about, all his comments were answered.
Everyone that we received from the OneDecatur.org website were.
They were not answered.
Okay, and I'm talking about, they wouldn't necessarily be on these pages.
I agree.
Okay.
I agree with that.
So I've got all yours here. We'll look at them and make sure, see which ones we're missing then.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
Send them to me, I'll make sure that they got addressed in some way. All right, if
All right.
there's nothing else, I really appreciate it, buddy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.